We tend to think of sound as, well, just something we hear, right? Music, talking, all the noise of daily life. But what if it was more than that? What if, for ancient cultures, sound was actually a kind of technology, a tool they used to connect our world with the world of spirits? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today, how ancient Japan used the power of sound to reach for something transcendent.
And to really get this, you have to ask yourself, what did their world even sound like? I mean, try to imagine it. No humming refrigerators, no traffic, no phones buzzing. A world that was defined by its quiet. Now, in that kind of deep silence, a single, deliberate sound, like a drum beat or a chant, it wouldn't just be heard, it would be felt. It would have a real, tangible power.
And this really puts it into perspective, doesn't it? The ancient soundscape was all about the natural world. Wind, fire, footsteps. Every sound had a clear source and a meaning. So people back then were tuned into sound in a way we've totally lost. Our world is just a constant blast of noise. So you can see why, for them, an intentional sound wasn't just noise. It was a powerful, powerful tool.
And because they were so sensitive to sound, they had a completely different idea of what it was for. See, the earliest music wasn't for dancing or entertainment. No, it was for something much bigger. It was for magic.
This quote just nails it. For many ancient people, the whole point of making a sound wasn't to create something beautiful. It was to create a tool, a sound that could talk to animals or the weather or the spirit world. It wasn't art. It was power. It was jujitsu, magic.
In Japan, this idea had a name, Otodama, which basically means sound spirits. The belief was that a real spiritual power actually lives inside of sound. So when you heard a bronze bell ring or a zither being played, it wasn't just vibrating air. It was a spiritual force you could actually summon and use to change things in the world.
So if sound has this incredible power, who were the ones that could actually use it? Who could harness these otodama to open a line to the other side? Well, that job fell to the shamans, the ancient masters of the sacred.
A shaman is basically a bridge, someone who can cross between our physical world and the spiritual one. Their main skill is entering a trance, a totally different state of consciousness, so they can talk directly with gods, ancestors, you name it. And what's their #1 tool for getting into that trance? You got it, sound and ritual.
Okay, and this is super important. Not all trances are the same. They generally fall into 2 buckets. First, you have ecstasy. This is when the shaman's own soul actually leaves their body and travels to the spirit world, kind of like an out-of-body experience. But then you have possession, which is the opposite. A spirit or a god enters the shaman's body and uses it like a vessel to speak. And knowing this difference is the absolute key to understanding how these ancient rituals really worked.
Which brings us to this really incredible idea. We all have this image of a lone shaman chanting by a fire, right? Well, forget that. The evidence points to something way more organized, a whole different structure for these spiritual practices in ancient Japan.
It's called the witch ritualist set model. And the theory is that these big, important rituals, they weren't a solo act. They were a team effort with very specific roles. You had one person who was the medium, and then a whole group of people who were basically the stage directors.
So here's how it worked. You've got the Miko. She's the medium, the one who goes into the trance and becomes the vessel for the spirit. But, and this is the crucial part, she doesn't do it alone. She's guided by the Sanniwa. The Sanniwa are the ritual directors. They're the ones using chants and music to guide the Miko into her trance. They interpret what the spirit says, and they make sure the whole thing goes off without a hitch.
Now, I know this might sound a little theoretical, but it turns out we have a perfect example of this model playing out in one of the most famous stories in all of Japanese mythology, the tale of the sun goddess Amaterasu hiding in a cave.
Just think about the story. The goddess Amino Uzume gets up on an overturned tub and does this wild, hilarious, ecstatic dance. She's completely in a trance-like state. She is the Miko. But what about all the other gods? They're not just an audience. They're the Sanniwa. They're busy forging the sacred mirror, crafting the jewels, doing divination rituals. They are actively directing the whole ceremony to lure Amaterasu out of the cave. They're the crew, and Amino Uzume is their star.
And the coolest part is, this set model isn't just some ancient myth. We can still see the echoes of these practices, this belief in sound, trance, and ritual teams, alive and well in ceremonies all across Asia today.
First, let's look at Bali. In the incredible Chris dance, performers go into a deep trance, basically possessed by protective spirits. They then turn these sacred daggers on themselves to fight off a witch's dark magic, and they're protected from harm by the white magic of a guardian spirit. It's this amazing, intense public ritual, all about trance and the battle between spiritual forces.
Okay, now let's go to Izumo, Japan, a place just soaked in mythology. This is where they found ancient bronze bells, or dotaku, that were almost certainly used to summon the gods. And even now, there's a sacred ceremony where the quiet, repeating sound of a zither is used to create what's called a trance of silence. It just goes to show you, connecting with the divine doesn't always have to be loud.
And for our last stop, we're jumping over to the Goto Islands. Here, during the Obon Festival, you'll see the Nenbutsu dance. The whole community gets together, and the combination of powerful chanting and the sharp ring of bronze gongs creates this incredible energy. The sound is meant to break down the wall between our world and the next, bringing the living and the spirits of the dead together in one shared moment.
All right, so after looking at the theory, the myths, and how these traditions are still alive today, what's the big picture? What have we really learned about sound and the sacred in ancient Japan?
Let's break it down. First, in that quiet, ancient world, sound was way more than just sound. It was a magical technology called otodama. Second, these big rituals weren't run by a single person. They used a team, the set model, with a Miko medium and a Saniwa crew directing everything. Third, this whole structure is baked right into Japan's most important myths, like the story of Amaterasu. And finally, you can still find the DNA of these ancient sound rituals in ceremonies all over, from Bali to Izumo.
And all this leaves us with one last thing to think about. If ancient people could use sound to open doors to other worlds, what have we lost? What connections have we drowned out in the nonstop noise of our modern lives? It kind of makes you want to just be quiet for a minute and listen.